we just finished Sunday evening here, and just wanted to remind you about what we looked at on Sunday morning. So we were thinking about Philippians chapter 4, verse 10 to the end, and we were seeing that the passage is mainly talking about Christianity and money and how do they fit together, especially in the area of gospel giving to kind of gospel ministry. So I had 2 points on Sunday morning. The first one was focusing in on verse 11, 12 and 13, where Paul was talking through he'd learned a secret. It was a secret that he'd learned in the classroom, and it's also a secret that he'd learned and put into practice, and he'd learned kind of in the workshop, kind of learned by doing. And he'd learned this secret of being content in any and every situation. So he'd been through some really, really great times, times of plenty, but also times of real poverty. And Paul says, I want to share a secret with you, a secret that will help you to live life and find contentment. And he says that the secret is found there in verse 13. The secret to contentment is that he can be content through or in Jesus, who gives him strength. He says, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I can do all this in Christ who gives me strength. Paul says the way to be content is to find contentment in Jesus. You see, we look for contentment in lots of other things. We can look for it in money to provide, security or status or freedom or joy or peace or rest or justice. But Paul says, actually, you might look in the world for those things, but really the place where you'll find those in Jesus. So we're going to be thinking a bit more about that together. And then we flew over the whole passage, well, especially verse 10 to 19, and saw how the Philippian church had been giving generously to help Paul do gospel ministry. And we saw a few things about how giving generously can be a really good thing. Good thing for us, good thing for others. So we saw in verse 10 that being generous with our money, giving to gospel ministry, it encourages other Christians. Verse 10, and Paul was really encouraged by the fact that they were doing it. We saw that giving to gospel ministry, verse 14, allows us to share together, to partner together, to join in with what other people are doing around the world. We saw in verse 18 that Paul says that he has actually, their giving has really helped him. And we saw at the end of verse 18 that gospel giving also is something that pleases God. And we saw a really strange one right in the middle in verse 17, that actually the reality of Christians giving money to the gospel ministry is something that we're moved from the inside to want to do, and we do it freely. But actually, as we do that, it's something that's good for us. Do you see that in verse 17? He says, not that I desire your gifts, what I desire is that more may be credited to your account. Paul says that as we live the Christian life, as we give to other things, that actually it brings a credit to our account. It brings us joy as we share in the kind of partnering together in the gospel. It brings us a sense of that we can really trust Christ. So we're going to be thinking together about giving to the gospel and finding contentment tonight.